Ronald here, and I'm here today with a wonderful guest that has made a huge contribution to Toronto's new amendments to their zoning bylaw, which is now allowing multiplexes throughout Ontario. So I'm here today with Michael Piper. He is actually the Director of Urban Design at the University of Toronto. So welcome, Michael. You are actually doing a lot of work with the City of Toronto, but you're also a professor at the University of Toronto School of Cities. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do at the university?
Okay, thanks, Ron. Yes, I'm a professor actually at the Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design, and so
Whoa.
yeah, no, it's
break
messy.
it down, break it down.
It's messy, but no.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my official title, assistant
awesome.
professor there, and I'm the director of the Master of Urban Design program, as you mentioned, and so urban design looks at things like policy, built form. How housing is made, and so kind of somewhere in between architecture and urban planning. So that's maybe a little bit about where I'm coming from.
Oh, no, absolutely. Urban planning, urban design, built form. Well, we know that the new multiplex zoning bylaw encompasses all of those sort of phrases that you throw there, all those, that glossary of terms. And there's a lot more that comes with it, like the missing middle, citizen developers and stuff like that. But before we dive into some of those things, I want to talk about your contribution to this multiplex zoning bylaw, because you had an instrumental role in it, you and your team, and you have coordinated that. So what exactly was your role?
So at the U of T, I started a lab, you'd call it, and we do research about the relationship between built form or buildings and policy. And so we started a project called Rehousing in collaboration with LGA architectural partners.
Yeah.
And with that project Rehousing, we've been studying a bunch of different types of homes in Toronto and how you can convert them to multiplexes. So the city, and we've been kind of in collaboration and chatting with them through the School of Cities, as you had noted. Yeah. They've been focusing mostly on how to convert multiplexes in the downtown. We've been researching how to convert multiplexes across the whole region of Toronto, so like the suburban areas and all that sort of stuff. And that's where we kind of contributed to what they're doing, is adding some knowledge about these other kind of areas of the city outside of downtown Toronto.
No, absolutely, and I like that because we have a not a looming, we have a pending, like not even a pending, and a happening crisis right now.
Yeah.
And what is actually happening is that people don't have housing options.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the main focus of the study, the EHON, right? Expanding housing option in neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the Toronto study. So you contributed to that through the rehousing. So I want to talk a little bit about that because that was such an important study, and that resource is such important. Even I spent some time on that website, and hence the reason why I thought it was so important to connect with you. So talk about a little bit about some of the housing types that you guys looked at.
So let's see.
And I know it's a lot.
We did look at a lot, but basically what the EHON group, Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods, they contacted us, and they wanted to figure out what the implications for zoning policy would be if you thought more broadly about different types of house across the region, different types of houses across the region.
Yes.
So, we did look at one of the downtown types, what we might call like a pre-war semi-detached or an interwar semi. A lot of folks are familiar with that.
Yeah.
We looked at like the post-war bungalow as an example, and then there's the area further outside of Toronto, like closer to Steeles, at the fringe of the city itself, that we're calling kind of the metro burb generations.
Yeah.
So we came up with this terminology to describe different generations or types of homes. And we tested out again, like if you were to build a multiplex, a new build for the purposes of the city of Toronto, on that lot, what are the problems with existing zoning, and what would need to change to not prevent that from happening?
Yeah.
So I think you were asking about the housing types. I don't know if I covered that enough. Yeah.
So no, you can definitely jump into that. And the reason why I want to speak about the housing types, because as a BCI designer, we work with a lot of clients that are actually doing a fair bit of conversions. And now that multiplexes are allowed, we'll be getting a ton load of inquiries.
Yeah.
So we're now looking at bungalows, where those post-war bungalows, which seem to be
they're like
the
sweet
most
spot,
the sweet spot, the most
Yeah, yeah.
popular. But you know, when you look at some of the work that needs to go into converting a bungalow into a multiplex, I believe it's significantly more. So what are your thoughts in terms of the types, and what are some of the complexities that go into converting them?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we thought it was important to look at the different types of homes across the city is that different kinds of homes offer different possibilities for creating additional units.
That's right.
Like in the downtown, the ceiling height's pretty low for the basement, so it's harder to create a basement suite. Bungalows have good ceiling height. There's always usually a second entrance to the basement. It makes it pretty easy to make a basement suite. Also, the lots are really big, so you can do an attached accessory unit to a bungalow or a detached garden suite. So that's kind of what the post-war generation offers, is big lots, low lot coverage, and a little flexibility. That's why they're so popular, I think.
That's right.
What's interesting about the Metroburb generation, or the generation further out, is the buildings are substantially larger than most of the ones in the post-war or the middle ring in the downtown.
Yeah.
And you can actually get up to 5 or 6 units within some of the post-war, or sorry, some of the Metroburb generation building types. So what that generation offers is the ability to kind of create a multiplex without having to do any exterior construction, which is like, you know, really valuable.
Absolutely. And, you know, you talked about the post-war, you talked about the Metroburb. I've actually never even heard that word.
I know.
You guys made that word up, right?
We didn't make it up, but like we you know, it sort of bubbles in the academic circle, which, you know, we borrowed it and
No, that's good. That's good. But one of the, so what you're saying, like, there are obviously pros and cons for every type of building. So we're talking about the post-war bungalow. Those are the most common, I think, around. They have larger lots, they have higher ceilings, height in the basement. But of course, in order to add a multiplex there, an addition is absolutely necessary, whether you're going vertical or you're going horizontal, depending on the size of the lot. But when you're looking at, let's say, I think you'd call this an interwar, like interwar row houses, the older ones. So those are actually, they have shorter basement heights, right? Because that time no one was living in basements, and there wasn't any particular type of building code that would restrict those low headrooms. But also, they have 2 and 2.5 stories. So those are, in my opinion, somewhat less for constructing. Maybe some underpinning, maybe just replacing a roof. So what are your thoughts on in terms of what are some of the hurdles that you can encounter on some of those? For the older generation. For the older generation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that most of downtown has been allowing multiplexes for a while already. So therefore, you're seeing a lot of these types of homes being converted to a duplex or a triplex, even if the basement isn't being used. And part of that's because they're set up in a really straightforward way. Anyone who's, you know, been inside one of these buildings know what they look like on the ground floor. There's a stair on the side. On the other side, there's living space. On the top floor, the stairs on the same side, and the bedrooms are on the other side. So it's a really straightforward layout, and it makes it possible to turn it into flats. So a ground floor unit, a second floor unit. Maybe you can do an addition to the third floor in the same kind of organization. So that's been really common in downtown, and a lot of these buildings have already been converted. So that's what you know, they have to offer.
Well, guys, that's just a teaser into what's to come next. Right now, we're going to jump into our Riverside conversation. And our Riverside conversation, we're going to just explore a little bit about Michael and who he is as a person, why it is he chose the particular field that he's in. So, Michael, I have a question for you, my friend. Why did you choose architecture as a field of study?
I didn't choose architecture. I chose biology.
Architecture chose you?
I didn't think I was artistic enough.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that everyone in the architecture program when I was in college, and I'm from Atlanta and Georgia Tech, and everyone's using parallel bars and straight edges, and I was like, I can do that. So I started, you know, I always, so to
But
be
the curiosity
clear.
came.
Yeah, the curiosity came.
Yeah.
I've always loved thinking systematically about things, which is why I started studying biology.
Yeah.
And it's actually why I like doing urban design as a design practice. It's not about making a single building. It's about thinking systematically about the built environment.
Yes, yes, yes.
So that rehousing project it's not just about, oh, here's a multiplex.
That's interesting.
But it's about how can we convert systematically the standard types of homes we have in our city into multiplexes.
Well, I guess it goes without saying, but I must ask, why academia?
Oh, that's another great question. I didn't start with academia. Actually, I'd always wanted to get into academia,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to start teaching or being a professor right after grad school.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would be important if I was going to be in academia that I knew what was going on in the world. So I spent about 10, 12 years working in private practice for private development, frankly, for real estate developers,
Yeah.
learning how that works, learning the language, learning what we as designers can contribute to real estate, and not just real estate, but equitable real estate. That's something
right.
I care a lot about in a positive way. And so with that experience, then I came back to academia. And so projects like rehousing are an effort to bring sort of real life issues, real world problems into the context of academia and to think about it critically in that space.
Wow, that's an amazing response, by the way. If you guys haven't taken a look at Rehousing, that's rehousing.ca, you need to check it out. It's an amazing website, put together, very organized. Just as Michael just said, he liked to look at things big picture, but also systematically. So that website really lays out how what are some of the properties that can be converted into multiplexes, and how to go about doing that? And it has a lot of really cool graphics as well. But with that said, I'll ask you this. It seems like you're doing pretty well for yourself and you love what you do. You hang around a lot of students. So what would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, that's I knew this was coming and I didn't prepare a good answer. Okay, let me think. The big thing, actually, I'd say the big thing is when I was younger, I was kind of seeking out problems to solve when in fact there's problems kind of right in front of you all the time. And as a professor, or as an academic, one of our jobs is to offer our time that's afforded to us by having the privilege of being a professor, to offer our time to what's going on in the world and to try to address issues, address problems. And I guess this is what I'm trying to say is I didn't need to invent problems. They're just right there. And so paying attention to policy, like what's going on with the city, what's happening with kind of changes in how planning works and how designers can contribute to that discussion. So I wish I had maybe done that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And really having that point of view now, I mean, obviously, you are looking at current problems. Hence the reason why.
That's
so kind of on the flip side of that, now you're actually doing that.
Now I've learned my lesson, and I'm like, I can just actually deal with things.
So you mentioned you kind of dropped a word in there, like equitable real estate, I think you said.
Yeah.
And I guess that is obviously one of the problems, right? Like social real estate, equitable real estate. Like, so explain what that is and how do you kind of facilitate that process?
Yeah, I mean, so at the end of the day, we have a way that we build in the city. We build housing through the market. It's through real estate and development, and that's what we have. And whether I like it or not isn't the question. It's a question of what we want that market to deliver for us. And one of the things that I want the market to deliver is more affordable housing. I'm not going to say how old I am, but I would have liked to have purchased a home a lot sooner. And I know lots of folks who would like to purchase a home a lot sooner or now in their lives, folks who wish their rent were lower. And the question is, how do we get there? And it's not by, I think, saying we don't need to have a market, but how do we make that market work better for more people? And so that's what I mean by equitable, offering opportunities for people of different backgrounds, economically, racially, to access the market that maybe they are precluded from.
Absolutely. And I oftentimes say that, if you're welcoming a lot of people into Canada and a lot of those people are coming to Toronto, you got to welcome these people with housing options.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's really unfair to tell someone to come to your home and basically you give them nothing to drink,
right?
Right.
So if you're going to invite them, you better give them,
at least give them housing, right? But the reality is that that's something that Toronto struggled with for years, right? So my question is, do you think the multiplex zoning bylaw has gone far enough?
I mean, you know, the critical side of me always knows there's something more, but it's been such a long, I think, struggle to actually get this through. I mean, discussions for however long that have been squashed by folks who didn't want it to happen. So right now, at the heels of its passage, I'm just very happy about that. Now, to the point about going further, I think it's not about liberalizing zoning more, although, yes, 6 or 5 units would be great.
Yeah.
But I think what needs to be in place is actually incentives, structures, systems, and processes that enable, I'd say again, a broader spectrum of citizens to access affordable rental and/or affordable ownership.
I really like that. So let's talk about those three things: incentives, systems, and I believe you said accessibility, right? So what are some of the incentives you think that maybe could be done from a, I don't know, city, provincial, federal level, like that can support this type of housing?
So a lot of folks in the planning world, and I mean people that I'm working with and have had conversation with, think that cities and the province should provide either low or no interest loans and or investment directly into someone's mortgage. Let me think about it another way. Or let me try to speak about it another way. In California, a while back, they were trying to encourage, the state and municipalities were trying to encourage folks to use solar panels. And so what they did is that the city would pay for your solar panels, and you would pay back over 15 years with the revenue generated from the energy you were generating on site. And it worked out pretty well, almost too well. In fact, the grid in California ended up having to, well, they had a shortfall, so they had a big budget. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'll stop. But you know what I'm saying,
yes,
right?
Yes, go on. No.
So the same idea, I think, could work for the purposes of generating extra units in home. Extra units, new units would generate income. Some of that goes to the homeowner. Some of it could go to pay back a low interest loan that the city or the province is providing, and thereby enabling folks who maybe are just on the edge of being able to afford to do these kinds of additions or conversions to actually make them happen.
No, absolutely. And kind of dovetailing off of that, some of the things I've heard some other sort of financial professionals sort of talking about, or strategizing about what are some of the incentives. One of the incentives obviously can be, being able to finance, because right now I believe CMHC would insure mortgages on 5 or plus units, right? And this is something I think is becoming a huge conversation. Why don't you expand on that? Let me hear your thoughts on that. No, go for it.
I was just having a conversation with someone, and this is, have we gone far enough? This would be the one issue or the one aspect of why we stopped at 4. Yeah. So the multiplex multiplex regulations currently allow 4 units per home in the principal building. Yeah. 5 would qualify them for this insurance by CMHC. So why not 5? Sorry, yes, we haven't gone far enough. We need to have 5 so that folks can get that insurance.
Maybe we don't have 5, but maybe the incentive, or maybe there's a policy where they start from 4.
4, yeah.
Maybe at least in Toronto, in some areas, right?
Yeah. I mean, frankly, why not start at 3? Because I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of developers maybe building 5 units, maybe 4 units, but like the average homeowner looking to kind of to find a little extra income to pay off their mortgage, they're going to be doing 1 or 2 units only. So, and I think that's actually the level we need to be supporting more is that, the kind of homeowners, the prospective homeowners that are trying to create a little extra income, that sort of thing.
No, absolutely. So I agree with you. It would be nice to say on every lot, we're moving from a single family, now we have 5 dwelling units, right? But the chances are that's not going to happen because we're working with a lot of quote-unquote citizen developers, right? So what are some of the systems you think that we can put in place to help citizen developers?
So one is citizen developers. Let's say are folks.
Who are citizen developers? First, so that everyone knows. It's kind of self-describing, but
I don't like to brag too much, but I'm going to brag about this. We came up with this term a couple of years ago, and the reason we thought about this is that when you're in the kind of space of multiplex making, you're not talking about, I think, in terms of feasibility, you're not talking about a developer coming in and buying up a lot and making a 5-plex. I mean, yes, that's going to happen, and yes, absolutely, let's support that. But I think more the way we're going to get scale and housing creation in the context of low-rise neighborhoods is by enabling non-professionals, homeowners, prospective homeowners, to create extra units. And these folks, they're not professionals in design, development, or construction. So, however, they're developers. And so the term citizen developer is intended to describe a class of people who are going to be creating housing, but who don't have experience. And this is really important to recognize, because these folks, you can't just use the same systems, the same kind of zoning review, building review processes that we offer to traditional developers. We have to create systems of review, finance, and design, frankly, that support people who don't have a lot of experience. And so to your question, and I realize I'm rambling, so I'll make this last part short and we can
Please
go
go
for
right ahead. No need to ramble. In fact, the more information you can give here is the more you're going to impact what it is the listeners do with this information. So I appreciate this, by the way.
And so what I think that we can do, and actually this is something that we're working on that my colleagues and myself are working on now, is developing kind of guides, workbooks, tools that are not just informative. Like, we don't need to see more text. We need to see things that are kind of visually compelling,
actionable,
easy graphics with really straightforward explanations about all the steps through the process. And so, like a guide for a citizen developer or a workbook for the citizen developer, I think really needs to happen to enable this to achieve scale. So someone we're working on. Keep your ears peeled for, maybe a year or two out, and we'll have that to offer.
A year or two?
Well, things take time. I mean, like baby steps, we'll have something fun to share soon. But, I want to make sure that whatever we're putting out into the world is not just kind of compelling and all that stuff, but is works with regulation, can offer not just things that I or my colleagues want to see happen, but things that are feasible. And that takes time to do it right. So maybe not 2 years, but some time anyway.
Well, absolutely. And we're getting a lot of those questions, in-house. We're getting a lot of questions like, hey, what is my property? Is the site going to work? How much is it going to cost to build? Do you guys do budgets? How long will this take? What are some of the nuances? So, what we do on a few projects in different municipalities, including Toronto, of course, we do this sort of what we coin as suitable. We've seen if the property can actually be converted into duplex, triplex, or fourplex. So what are some of the criteria that you think is really important for someone to look at on any one of the housing typologies, right?
No, that's a great point, actually. So the suitability of a home, or the plexibility, as mentioned earlier, when talking about the different types, really depends on the type. Certain types are going to be easier to convert the interior into a triplex. Other types are going to be easier to make additions to, and they're based on a set of variables. Frankly, a lot have to do with access and egress. And that sort of thing. So I don't know if I'm having a good answer for it. Just to say it really does depend on the type. And I think we're part of this guide that was mentioned earlier that we're working on is actually trying to build a robust kind of online system to allow people to evaluate their existing home to see what the options are for converting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to be really important if this multiplex zoning bylaw is to have the intended impact. But what is that intended impact? What do you think? Do you think this multiplex zoning bylaw is going to solve our housing crisis?
Yes. No, it's not going to solve the problem.
It's not.
No, but I mean, it's that's the thing is there's no silver bullets. You hear people say all the time, and I believe in that. It's going to require different scales, different conditions, different types of housing happening across kind of a variety of markets and different, and so I would never, I think sometimes folks say, yes, we need to be focusing on creating multiplexes. Forget about condos. No, we're going to need condos. We're going to need multiplexes.
That's right.
We're going to need apartments. We're going to need to rehab old apartments. Actually, I'll put a kind of shout out for that option. I feel like, too often some of our olding apartment and rental stock is left unattended, but don't want to get off topic.
Deferred maintenance.
That's right.
Too long.
No, exactly.
Yeah, way too long. No, absolutely. So, let's talk a little bit about your world, actually.
Okay.
This whole design, this urban design, and I know you made a distinction between urban design and urban planning. But what are some of the things that can be done on that side? Because policy is high level. How is it actionable now in the building department, and how can they streamline those sort of processes?
I'm not sure if our audience is going to hear too much about what urban design is, but I'm going to maybe mention one thing that I regret about what my field of study has done with city building, and then how I think we can do better. And that I hope will answer the question that you're asking.
Yeah.
In the past, urban design has contributed to what's called form-based regulations or form-based zonings.
Yes.
So this is like zoning envelopes or the area within which someone can build a building. And over time, we've tended to make that envelope more and more complex. There's steps, there's jogs, and the more and more complex angular planes to prevent shadow. Yeah, you need to make sure that we're nice to the neighborhood besides. So, all of these things that we've done to basically complicate the shape of a building have exacerbated the cost of construction. So the more complicated, the more stepped that we make, and the more kind of returns and all that stuff, the more expensive it gets. And so what I'd like to do with urban design, or what I think urban design should do alternatively, is foreground how can we build more affordably, and then look at our zoning code, look at our regulations that govern the shape of what a building can be, and foreground affordability of construction. Like, as a designer, I'm not going to be able to make something affordable. Affordability has to do with incentives and loans and financing. It's way beyond. But what I can do, and what we as designers can do, I think, is encourage more affordable construction, lower cost construction that then enables people to charge lower rents or lower prices for the product that they're selling or renting.
Wow. Well, that's actually a really good segue into this piece, because there's a lot of different alternate methods that are now popping up. Not that they were now invented, but they're now popping up. Like, so everyone has like all these different type of kits, panelized construction, modular construction. So do you think that has a place in providing a solution, a rapid housing solution for this type of multiplex zoning bylaw?
I know that there's no kind of kit for converting a home to a multiplex.
You said it, not me.
So there's kits for doing garden suites, right? Like, so a granny's flat or and a detached ADU in your backyard. You can plunk one down. Actually, not always. You need to have enough space to get it back there affordably, but I won't go there. So you can have a kind of prefabricated modular kind of, or actually there's other techniques, panelized for example, that make kind of detached units possible.
That's correct, yes.
With multiplexes, or with the conversion of an existing building, which offers vast economies based on the fact that you're not using new material, I think that's a really important piece.
That's right.
But the diseconomy, or the thing that makes it costly, is that you have to deal with all kinds of junk that are inside an existing home. People that have added layers to their house, they've added a wall, they've done this, maybe the ceilings drop. What about the electrical? There's wires all over the place.
Yeah.
And so in order to approach this, there's no kind of kit of parts, but what there can be are systems, I think, or they're processes for systematizing the individual elements that go into making a conversion. Like, can we create a toolkit for a kitchen, right? Like, I know I can't do the whole floor plan. I know I can't take one of the standard types that we looked at and offer a floor plan that's going to work everywhere. But what we could do is offer kind of standard kitchens, that enables folks to kind of like predict what the cost of a kind of a new kitchen, and that's not uncommon. That actually already kind of happens.
Yeah. No, that's great. And in fact, I will say that there's a lot of talk around standardizing the process. I believe there's a bigger opportunity, or a higher likelihood of success for standardizing the design process versus standardizing the construction process. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with me, or you disagree?
No, absolutely. I think it's not to your point, I think it's not going to be about standardizing what gets built. Although I do think there's opportunities.
Could be some
for
opportunity.
There are. But I think there's greater opportunities for streamlining the design process.
And the review process.
And the design. Well, I mean, I see, like, especially for BCIN folks, So let's say there's architects. A lot of what gets built is managed by people who have, what does BCIN stand for?
Building Code Insurance Number.
So no, but
Yeah.
these are the folks that are
Yeah.
actually producing a lot of
Yes.
our, that will be, I believe, producing a lot of our multiplexes. And so a lot of that work has to do with getting a basic plan down, take it into the city to get approved so that you can go ahead and build. And that process, I think could be, vastly streamlined. So to the extent that there are, maybe details that the city has pre-approved that you can access as a BCIN,
That's correct.
These kinds of things that enable like designers to create these sets of drawings more efficiently and cost effectively.
Oh, absolutely. Over the 6 years of doing duplexes, triplexes, and now fourplexes, we have in-house created our own standard sort of pool of details that we know we've utilized consistently, and they show up on every drawing because this stuff doesn't need to be recreated, but it could be standardized. And I think more importantly, the city needs to recognize a standardized set of drawings. You may have seen or maybe know of this the TAC buck details. I think it's Toronto Association of Building Officials or something like this, right? But they have that set of details that they use for building a house.
That's right.
In some cases, you can just take that as a homeowner and just give it to the city and say,
right.
this is
Here
what
it
I'm
is.
building,
I'm
right?
ready.
Because they have already approved that.
That's
They
right.
need to consider a very similar type of format when it comes to multiplexes. So you agree, obviously, with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would say like that's something another area that I think can really see a huge amount of improvement. So in terms of efficiency. Now, in terms of the ownership standpoint, like what are some of the models that we think we can start exploring from an ownership standpoint when it comes to multiplexes? Because the reality is when you build these things, it costs money.
Yeah.
So how are we going to recoup some of this money? And can I sell these? What? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, actually, I'm a designer, so I could just talk about buildings and architecture all day. But at the end of the day, it's who's doing it and how they're doing it and the motivations for doing it. And by doing it, I mean creating the multiplex.
Yes.
That ultimately drives a project. And until you as an individual understand what your motivations are, then it's hard to make a decision about what you're going to make. So let's maybe give some specific examples.
Yeah.
Like one example is, I'm about to retire. I'm not going to have income coming in. I need to supplement my retirement plan.
That's
so
right.
I create a couple of units in my home to rent out. Maybe I live in one, or maybe I've moved into my garden suite.
That's right.
That idea about what you're trying to get out of the project drives actually what you build, not what you build, but the whole process for building it.
Absolutely.
I could go into a scenario, but I'm going to...
No, I like that. So, the truth is, like, so what you just described there, of course, everyone knows it's aging in place. And we, of course, some clients, when they come to us, we explain to them, you need to understand, you're right. We can't just jump into, well, your property, you have a 200-foot by 50-foot lot. Like, that's not the first step. The first step is, what is the ultimate goal or end use of this property? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And that really starts to drive the conversation. Okay, well, let's try to phase this project out for you. Because these are expensive projects too, right? So let's hear about what are your thoughts on the whole idea of aging in place and phasing these projects out?
Phasing is my favorite word. I don't know why.
Okay, good.
But I mean, I love thinking about homes and buildings not as a static, thing that you make, but as something that changes and grows just like a family does. And the ability to think fluidly about your house or the housing that you're creating for homeowners is key. Because, you may have 2 kids living at home now, but in 10 years, they're going to be gone. So what are you going to do with those bedrooms? What are you going to do with the basement that your college student kid came back and lived in for a couple of years, but now they're gone?
That's right. Yeah.
All these kinds of things. So the idea of phasing, I think, is so important. And the thing that's fascinating to me about
it is fascinating, by the way. That's okay. Let's do that.
Let's do it. So the thing that's fascinating about this for folks that maybe homeowners or prospective homeowners that are looking to create units is if you think this way, it actually makes it more feasible and also a little bit more easy to digest. Like maybe I can't afford to build 3 units in my house today because I only have 30,000 in the bank.
That's right.
You know, but maybe I can build one now, and then in 5 years I can leverage my equity at that point to build a second. And maybe in 10 years I build a garden suite that I move into and then rent the whole kit and caboodle out as 3 apartments. You know, like that's kind of thinking dynamically about property.
That's
and I
right.
think it's super important.
I really like that point because you know what, we are obviously evolving and we're going through different stages in life. And if you have a property that can support you through each of those stages, that's really good. And that's kind of, you know, I'm going to ask this question here because I think is obviously important. But, you know, there are a few different groups or different strategies that could be implemented here. So for aging in place, you got someone that's moving away, or sorry, they're downsizing. They can age in place in the neighborhood that they like and still support their retirement income. Then you got the multi-generational type of family. Maybe your parent, your kids moved out, but now you can provide that sort of you know, support from multi-generational type of and family and so forth, so we can all live in the same building, right? So that's obviously the second part. And then you got like students that are coming and looking for housing. I know we didn't really get into the housing policy and stuff like that, but there's another group of people there. But this is the thing, right? One of the things that I think needs to be talked about, and a lot of people have questions about, is what are some of the ownership models available, right? Because as you move through different stages, you may not necessarily want to own this entire thing. Is there a way that you can co-own? Is there some sort of co-ownership model? Like, well, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a university professor. I have students. I have graduate students who are in their 30s. They finish school with a degree in architecture. They think they should be able to buy something within a few years after practicing for a while. And I think they should. Like, when you spend that much money on vacation, and so they can't. They move out of Toronto, and it's happening a lot. Like, we're losing, you know, I mean, I don't know what the stats are. I'm just thinking about the anecdotes I know, but we're losing, you know, important people in our city to other places that are offering more affordable options. So,
that's right.
To your question, I think that co-ownership offers an opportunity for, you know, a group of younger folks to co-purchase a home and to build up equity in doing so. And then maybe they go out on their own, or maybe they love living in a kind of co-ownership situation and they stay there, you know, for long term. And so this opens up a whole other kind of series of issues that are much more complicated than owning and renting.
That's right.
But really important to dig into. There's a group in this city, or sorry, an organization of realtors that they have a platform called Husmates, which y'all should check out. It's basically pairs up young folks to co-purchase a home, and they offer a lot of advice around, you know, what you need to do in order to not just purchase, but to endure over time with co-owners in a small lot like this.
That's right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a counselor. Like, you
It's
need to
a
get
counselor.
counseling.
You need a counselor.
To do that, because even when you're matching tenants, I think this is really important. And there's a whole bunch of operational stuff that we can get into. I mean, obviously, this has been a great conversation here. We can go on for really hours just talking about this sort of stuff. But what it is I want to sort of kind of dive into here now, as we start to wrap this conversation up, is, you know, some questions related to, you know, who you are, what does you enjoy doing outside of your professor type responsibilities. So tell me, give me 3 books, 3 resources, 3 books that you read, or 3 movies that you look at on a frequent basis.
Oh, man. You know,
1 book, 2 movies, however you want to break it up.
Okay, I'll try to do my best. It's actually, in the past couple of years since I've started doing this work, my hobbies outside of academia have actually turned to making stuff. So I've started building a lot. So I did my own basement suite renovation. I framed all the walls. I built all the cabinets.
Wow.
It's just to say, like, maybe it's embarrassing for my academic colleagues. Hopefully you're not watching. But, like, I don't actually read too much anymore because I've been so busy building stuff. But, let's see. So my biggest things outside of work are making things and biking across the city. I love exploring it. So that's how I spend most of my time when I'm not working.
What kind of bike? Like, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of, so I actually had this guy went to a project, and this guy rolled up on like a motor unicycle
man.
thing. Like, what do you what do you use for getting around the city?
Yeah. I mean, a bike.
A regular bike.
A bike that has
Yeah,
wheels
bicycle.
and you pedal it and it moves. No, but like it's fascinating
Yeah.
because there's this whole range of like stuff in between a bike and a motorcycle now. Like
Yeah.
the uni wheel, that's kind of it's crazy
Mopeds,
exciting.
scooters, like everything. Everything is. In fact, there's no more bicycles. Everything is motorized
I
now,
know.
right?
That's why I have a bike, because I think it's important for us to still use our legs. No, I mean, I like all this stuff, but I mean, I'll just say one thing that actually we haven't talked about with regards to housing that this relates to is like, we can't create density unless there's ways for people to get around, and unless everyone's going to be having a car. Things like these are actually super important. I didn't mean to bring it back to the serious conversation.
Absolutely. But this is also part of it, because as the communities become more vibrant, you can't have room for that many cars. And honestly speaking, if there's more housing in the city, there's not a lot of need to commute to the city, because people are going to be living there and working there and playing there. So I think you might see some change. Maybe not in the near future, maybe 100 years from now, but maybe vehicle and traffic and stuff might be a thing of the past.
Yeah,
right.
We hope.
We're hoping. So what are three resources? That people that you tap into. Obviously, you have created some of these resources. So let's hear about those first.
Rehousing.ca. That's the #1 resource. No, I mean, that's a plug. But
yeah, sure.
I spend a lot of time. Actually, we've been researching guidebooks from different municipalities in Canada and the U.S. About creating basement suites and garden suites and multiplexes. And I'm trying to think of the best one. Oh, shoot. It's for San Mateo in California. Super rigorous kind of guidebook. And so we're actually kind of taking some cues from that. Vaughn actually has a really good guidebook about how to create, I think, second suites.
Yeah.
Really methodical. The graphics have a little the desire, but, like the content is kind of, right there. So I don't know. I spend a lot of time kind of looking at these tools, partially to kind of learn how they work, because I think we need to make some for the GTA. So that's how I spend a lot of my time.
Well, you guys heard it. I mean, obviously, you definitely need to check with your local municipalities. Oftentimes, they have a lot of great resources there, but be sure to check out Rehousing, and of course, this new guide that Michael is working on, and I believe this will also be in collaboration with the City of Toronto as well.
So we're meeting with them soon to kind of talk about how when we make this guide, it can complement whatever they're doing. So not in collaboration, they haven't kind of put their stamp on it.
Got you.
But the goal, and fortunately, by working with them before, I think we've got an opportunity to continue with this next phase. So
that's great. My final question to you, my friend. You live in Toronto now, but you're studying in the U.S.
Yeah.
Which is your favorite city? Toronto or
Toronto.
another city
Toronto.
inside? Oh yeah, come on,
Yeah.
don't. Okay, I got your recording.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, so like I lived all over the States, and I lived in Europe and like the Middle East.
Okay. And Toronto is the
and Toronto, and I'll tell you why. It's like actually before I came here, I was in New York, and before New York, I was in Los Angeles. Like the coolest cities in the States or whatever. But the thing is like New York is cooked, Chicago's cooked, LA is cooked. Like the only places that are still getting built are like Toronto and Atlanta and Phoenix. And Phoenix is running out of water. Atlanta's where I'm from. It's a great place, but like, I don't know, like it's a little too kind of cowboy for me. The thing that's amazing about Toronto is that it's getting built now, and for better or worse, and sometimes frankly for worse, there's a lot of kind of effort to structure that growth, and it means there's opportunities for people like me to kind of engage those structures, the policies, and all that stuff. So as someone who's working in kind of city making, it's the most exciting place in North America to be.
Nice. The city maker, Michael Piper, and he is actually the director of master program, master of urban design at the University of Toronto, a school working with the School of Cities. Now, if you guys need to get in contact with Michael, what is the best way someone can shoot you a question if they needed to? Is it LinkedIn? Is it your website? Like what
I would go to rehousing.ca, and there's an email at the end, and it's info@rehousing, or I hate to say Google me, but my page at the U of T is the first thing that pops up, and my email, my U of T email's there. So I should be better at social media, but I'm not. So.
Well, this has been a great conversation with Michael. I certainly had a lot of learning tips that I got from this conversation, and I invite you to subscribe to our podcast and check out our social media handles, and be sure to listen to this episode and other future episodes on Ontario Sweet Spots. Catch you guys soon. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.